What's up guys? In the lead up to Faithless Forum, I will be doing a few more unique videos, stuff that you normally don't see on my channel. So let's go ahead and get right into my experience doing voice acting. Alright, like I said, in the lead up to Faithless Forum, I am going to be doing some more unique stuff on the channel, so I hope you guys are looking forward to that. What isn't unique, though, is that we are going to be handling the fan art section as per normal. The first thing we have is this piece from Spooky Boy Ray. Apparently the Rule 63 version of my avatar and Inane Dragon have done some things that I'm not entirely proud of. Next, we have some real-life art from Kitty. And finally, one of the more ambitious art pieces that has ever been sent to me, this 12-inch Suris plush, which is going to be making it into the background of all of my future live streams. Thank you all for your fan art submissions as usual, and let's get right into things. So, voice acting. It's one of those things that I've always wanted to give a shot at, and thanks to Prophet of Zod, I've actually been able to do a little bit of that. I've voiced a lot of characters in his cartoon series, including the favorite one I've done so far, Joseph, during the story of the birth of Jesus. As someone who grew up watching anime and cartoons, there was always a bit of a drive for voice acting to me. Not to mention, there were some things like the awkward lip sync in Sonic Adventure 2 that made me just want to give it a shot. Some of my earliest attempts at it were actually bits of voice acting I tried to do on an old channel, where I would voice over various stories from the game League of Legends. I've since deleted a lot of that work, and I kinda regret doing so. Now, even the videos that I'm not the most proud of, I do keep on my channel so I can look back and see how I've progressed. Back then, I really didn't have the same mindset, but it is thanks to those early videos that I did receive my Blue Yeti. You see, back then I was trying to do voice acting with a cheap Turtle Beach headset, and, well, they're not the most conducive for audio quality. It turns out, a friend of my parents actually was an audio producer, and he had a client who wanted to have their book voiced over as an audiobook. I said that I could probably do it, and sent him my work. As bad as my early attempts at voice acting were, he ended up liking them apparently, and sent me a Blue Yeti for free so that I could start work on the projects right away. I had absolutely no idea how to make the mic work. I thought that it would just be better by merit of being a Yeti. If you look at some of the earliest videos on my channel, you'll see that I had absolutely no idea how to make the microphone sound anywhere near good. Anywho, I tried getting in contact with the guy who sent me the Yeti, and he wouldn't respond, and a few weeks later, I found out why. It turns out that he was actually a convicted felon who had gone to jail for, well, some stuff that I'd rather not talk about involving children. This was all several years ago, but it was information that my parents didn't have at the time. Apparently, he had had an explosive falling out with them during a camping trip, and they did a little digging and found out that this was what was in his past. They opted to disassociate themselves with him because, well, he seemed like a bit of a dangerous person to be around, all things considered. It turns out that all of this was happening during the time that I was trying to get in contact with him to receive my instructions for the audiobook projects. He said that the deal was off and that it was not something that he would have time to put any effort into, and it was a few days after finally receiving that message that my mom told me what had happened. So even when I finally do upgrade this old microphone, I'm probably going to keep it because there is a story behind it. Anywho, that is at least how I got some of the starting equipment for working on my channel later on down the road. After starting the channel that you all know me for now, I really didn't make a whole lot of money off of it for a long time. Heck, I still don't. I make just enough to kinda get by, but there was a time where I really only made about $80 to $100 a month off of it, and that wasn't enough to sustain us. I ended up receiving an offer to do some voice acting work for a channel. It was one of those nameless top 10 channels. Here's a bit of a sample of what I did over there. Number 2, James and Oliver Phelps, Fred and George Weasley. James and Oliver Phelps, who played as Fred and George Weasley, have yet to hang up their wizarding robes. Of the entire Harry Potter crew, they were the most active in the wizarding world. Not the greatest, I know, but it's really hard for me to get any feeling behind something that I truly and honestly don't care about. As for how things went during the course of my time working for that channel, it started out with me being given about 20 or so scripts to read over. I was able to get them done very quickly in the beginning, but the amount of words on the script only equated to about 3 or 4 minutes of audio each. I know that sounds like it's reasonable for a bunch of top 10 lists, but bear in mind that this was technically a faceless corporation that owned a conglomerate conglomerate of channels. So they wanted the information on these lists extended to be at least 10 minutes so that they could include a bunch of mid-roll ads. So I ended up re-recording my first audios, speaking as slowly as I could manage in order to make sure that I could get that 10-minute mark. Once that was all done, there were no scripts left, and I was informed of the actual method I was supposed to utilize for working on this channel. Apparently, after all the scripts were read, I was to be given topics, and then I was supposed to compile everything about each and every topic. So for instance, I would have to compile everything for a top 10 list, do all the research for each individual topic in the top 10, write out the script, and then voice it over. So 2 to 3 hours of research usually, another hour or so of scripting, and then about 30 minutes to an hour of recording and re-recording until I had audio I was satisfied with. And the payment for every one of these was about $20. Not a whole lot, and certainly not worth the amount of time being put into it. Eventually, we got a scriptwriter to take care of the scripts and the research, but they wrote everything in broken English, so I had to translate everything that I read, and we could only convince them to write out about 800 words per script, otherwise I would have to sacrifice practically all of my pay I was getting for voice work in order to pay them for script writing. This led to most of the recording sessions being me reading what I could of the script, the things I could decipher, and then ad-libbing after the fact in order to hit the 10-minute runtime. Eventually, I would be given so many of these scripts that I could barely handle doing them, as well as working on my channel. I had pretty much been rewound back to the time where I was working full-time at a brick-and-mortar store, whilst also working on my channel. I was back to the sleepless nights and irritability in an effort to make enough money to make ends meet. Speaking of money, apparently the way that we were supposed to be paid was that my editor would get paid for all of the work via PayPal, and then they would split the money to me and the scriptwriter accordingly. I would send in an invoice for the work that I had done, and then they would send me payment afterwards. That is, until their PayPal account was shut down. Apparently, we also couldn't get a PayPal account set up for the scriptwriter for some reason, so then it came on to me to be the one that handled payroll, basically. Given that I was already doing everything else, this was something that I didn't want to take onto my shoulders as well, not to mention, I do have to pay taxes on anything that I get through PayPal. This means that on PayPal's side, I would have about $2,000 coming in on any given month. I personally would only receive a few $100s of that, but I would still have to account for everything for taxes. This would have literally eaten any income that I had actually received from any of the work I had done, so I put my foot down and said that I couldn't do that. This caused one of my last months working for these people to be, well, incredibly stressful. Rent was due, and we didn't receive any payment until way later in the month, because they had to figure out how they were going to manage sending payment to each individual person. For what it's worth, as far as I'm concerned, the company should have been paying us all individually, like any other company would do with a group of freelancers. That's not my editor's fault, nor the scriptwriter's fault. Due to me not working on that channel during that month in February, I was able to focus a lot more on mine, which is great, but then when we got paid and it was time to put our noses to the grindstone again, we had an entire month's worth of work to do in a couple of weeks. This, of course, was essentially an impossibility. Finally, that led to March, where scripts didn't come in on time anyways, due to a myriad of other issues, and between working on my channel, sitting for all the pets and goats and everything that are on my family's farm, cleaning everything out in the house that we had bought so that they could actually start renovations, as well as getting everything situated with our new house guest, there really wasn't any time to work on audios. And this ended up wheeling me back into my major anxiety. If you've suffered from anxiety, then you understand what it's like to not be able to communicate with people who you desperately need to communicate with due to all the other pressures surrounding the situation. I'd finally decided that there was too much going on, and it was time for me to quit, but it took me a long time to actually muster up the balls to say that. I let my editor know that I wasn't the person for this job. I couldn't get things done on time, and with everything else that was going on, it was better for me to spend my time focusing on my channel and my house. Of course, apparently this caused another situation. Because we weren't able to get all the audios in on time, and apparently one or two of them were scrapped due to quality issues, the person we were all working for gave the group an ultimatum. They could either accept half pay and continue working, or they could receive full pay for the month and be fired. The only one who was in a situation where they could actually leave this company was me, so they received their half pay, and I didn't really receive anything. That's one of the reasons why I ended up having to have a fundraiser earlier this month for me, since I literally didn't receive a paycheck that we had budgeted for me having. I'm still kind of torn in how I'm supposed to feel about that entire situation, but I can't really do anything about it. I just kind of have to accept that I have this experience to work off of now, so I know things that I won't be doing again in the future. It's kind of voice acting work, not the kind that I would have really preferred to do, but it is something that I have experience with now. All in all, I know that I'm not going to be repeating any of the mistakes I made before anytime soon. So what's the takeaway from this entire story? Well, if there's anything I can say, it's know what you're worth. If you're being commissioned for work, you might as well make sure that you are actually receiving what you are worth and what your work is worth. 4 to 5 hours of work is not worth $20. I don't personally hold any ill will to anybody involved in this scenario. If my old editor is listening to this video, then I do have a message for you. I hope that you can manage to get away from working with that company at some point soon. It's really not worth the mental stress, and I know about the various pay ultimatums that have been put forth for us over the time that I was working with them. But that's that. Situation's over, and now I'm working on my channel full-time again, without doing anything besides just that. I hope you guys enjoyed the story time, and I will be getting to a few more videos this next week, and they're going to be a little more unique than what you're used to. For all of you that are already going to be attending Faithless Forum, I hope to see you there. So as we roll into the Patreon slides, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.